In the early months of 1919, the world was only beginning to recover from one of the darkest chapters in human history. Entire nations were scarred, millions had vanished, and those who remained carried memories that refused to fade. Yet even in the aftermath of such devastation, there were people still searching for clarity, still trying to understand the universe around them. A few years earlier, Albert had stepped forward with a bold declaration, offering what he called a new law of the cosmos. He had completed the framework of general relativity and, soon after, solved the long-standing mystery of Mercury's orbital anomaly with remarkable precision. That theory would receive its first observational confirmation in 1919. During a solar eclipse, scientists tested Albert's predictions once again, measuring whether starlight would bend as it passed near the sun. The results aligned perfectly with his calculations, demonstrating the curvature of space-time itself. Albert later remarked that even if the experiment had produced results beyond his expectations, it would not have changed his conviction. He was certain the theory was correct. Otherwise, he joked, he would feel sorry for the universe, believing that it must have made a mistake somewhere. This wasn't just confidence. It was something much deeper. The eclipse findings transformed him almost overnight into one of the most recognized scientists on the planet. Someone had effectively announced, everything you thought you knew about the universe needs to be reconsidered. And after the evidence was revealed, even the skeptics began to accept it. Newspapers started printing anything he said as headline material. But the sudden fame didn't sit well with him. He once remarked that being famous made him feel foolish. That is often the way it works. Still, he never let that discomfort overshadow his admiration for the era's cultural icons. In 1931, at the premiere of Charlie Chaplin's legendary film City Lights, he finally met the comedian he had long wanted to meet. Their brief conversation that night eventually became part of cultural history. Albert turned to Chaplin and said, "What I admire most about you is how universal you are. You don't speak a single word, yet the whole world understands you." Chaplin responded with a line that has been quoted ever since. "That may be true, but your greatness is even more remarkable. Hardly anyone understands what you do, yet the whole world admires you." It was true that only a small portion of the public fully grasped general relativity or what it actually meant. But there were always people trying to make it understandable. In 1919, for example, Max Fleischer, the animator who later created Betty Boop, used the limited tools of his era to explain Albert's theory through an animation. This was exactly the kind of effort people referred to when they said he could make anyone talk about complex ideas. But all of this brings up a question that has been asked for generations. Albert was extraordinary, no doubt about it. But was he the greatest scientist in history? We keep trying to answer that question, even though the truth is simple. In science, there is no greatest. It isn't a competition. Every era has produced remarkable minds, and much of what we study today is built directly on the foundations laid by thinkers who lived hundreds or even thousands of years ago. Science is a collective effort, and Albert was an important figure within that larger team. As I mentioned earlier, humanity had just emerged from an incredibly dark period, and people like him became symbols of hope. Setting aside how revolutionary his work was, the world was ready for something different, ready to hear new ideas, to focus on something other than destruction, politics, and conflict. Isn't that exactly how we feel today? Yes, just like us. And those of us gathered under this shared curiosity are no different. We're tired of dwelling on the endless arguments, the power struggles, the small distractions. Somewhere out there, discoveries are waiting, and we want to talk about them. We want to understand them. We want to be part of them. Every difficult era produces a group of people who look beyond the chaos, searching for meaning in exploration. I simply didn't want to leave that unspoken. You are the torches that bring light into the darkness, and in my view, that deserves to be said plainly. Albert was one of the greatest, but even he stood on the shoulders of the giants who came before him. Without them, he would not have existed in the form we remember. That's an important truth to keep in mind. And now the question becomes, what happened next? Albert reshaped physics from the ground up. The laws governing the universe were rewritten, and with the growing contributions of scientists who built on his ideas, a new era of understanding began. But this was not the end of the story. Einstein's chapter did not close here, far from it. You might recall Milena. Albert had promised her that he would give her the prize money from the Nobel he expected to win. While working tirelessly toward that goal, his health deteriorated rapidly. Within just a few years, he became physically exhausted and came frighteningly close to death. The person who played a major role in pulling him back from that edge was his cousin Elsa. She cared for him with remarkable devotion, helping him recover and regain strength. They eventually married in 1919, but was it a happy marriage? Unfortunately, not really. Albert continued his old patterns. They slept in separate rooms, and he wouldn't even allow Elsa to enter his study. For all his brilliance, when it came to loyalty, he was a profound disappointment, something he himself openly admitted. He once said, "Every marriage is a failed attempt that inevitably ends in frustration. I can love humanity as a whole, that's not the issue. But becoming deeply attached to one person is extremely difficult for me." As always, he gravitated towards solitude, though circumstances soon forced him out of it. After the war, anti-Semitism in Germany intensified sharply. Some German scientists dismissively labeled his theories as Jewish science, using it as a way to discredit him. In response, Albert became increasingly vocal about his Jewish identity, even though it had not always been central to how he defined himself. During one speech he stated, "Thank you for allowing me to speak here as both a European and a Jew. I was born into Judaism, even if I have not lived according to all its expectations. As a child, I was deeply devout, reciting prayers out loud on my way to school. Then I read my first book on science. Over time, I realized that behind everything, behind all existence, there is an order that we can perceive only in fragments. I dedicated my life to understanding that order. If you choose to call that faith, then yes, I am a man of faith." As he searched for that underlying order, Albert had already begun questioning the nature of light itself. The path that eventually led to special relativity grew out of this pursuit, a desire to understand the hidden structure he sensed behind the universe. Then came the concept of space-time, a breakthrough that allowed him to see the first gears of that structure turning clearly, at least until the moment when everything shifted for him. The year was 1927, a turning point that delivered the first real blow to his understanding of cosmic order. It was the moment so many of us would give anything to witness, the 1927 Solvay Conference. By then, Albert had formed a grand picture of the universe. In his mind, it was as if he had taken a snapshot of the cosmos and pinned it to the wall. Everything fit that image perfectly. It was elegant, coherent, and deeply satisfying. But every era produces new challengers, and the 1920s were no exception. A new generation of theorists began pushing the boundaries of physics in ways that threatened to place a new frame on the wall beside Einstein's. Leading the movement was Niels Bohr, accompanied by brilliant young minds like Werner Heisenberg. They were diving into the very foundation of reality, shrinking the scale of inquiry and rewriting natural law itself. Quantum mechanics was emerging, and at the Solvay Conference of 1927, a battle of ideas erupted under the leadership of these young pioneers. They argued that the world of atoms and subatomic particles was governed not by perfect order, but by uncertainty and randomness. Einstein, who had spent years trying to uncover a deeper pattern in nature, saw this as a direct challenge. These physicists were essentially saying, "Albert, the order you believe you found may be nothing more than an illusion formed by chaos." He rejected that wholeheartedly. "I acknowledge that quantum mechanics is extremely successful," he said, "but uncertainty cannot be fundamental. Something must lie beneath it." He was searching for an explanation, a mechanism hiding underneath the apparent randomness. That was when he made his famous statement, "God does not play dice." But the opposition was unmoved. Bohr's response became equally legendary. "Albert, stop telling God what to do." Still, Einstein's confidence remained unshaken. He was certain that the universe was not built on chance. To him, there was no doubt. But proving it drove him to frustration, because no matter what counter-arguments he proposed, Bohr and the quantum physicists kept winning the debate. Einstein refused to be passive. He accepted that quantum mechanics worked, but insisted that people were missing the broader context, the larger picture. And in that larger picture,
He believed he would find the truth. He was convinced he was the one who could uncover it. He searched for a theory that could unite everything, a framework that blended the microscopic and the macroscopic, one that merged the forces of nature into a single coherent structure. The ultimate theory of everything. A theory that would fill the gaps he saw in quantum mechanics and restore the order he believed was real. He would dedicate the rest of his life to that search. The path ahead was never going to be easy. By the late 1920s, the Nazi Party was rapidly gaining power in Germany. And by 1932, Hitler was on the verge of becoming the nation's dictator. No one was safe. And as perhaps the most recognizable Jewish figure in the world at that time, Albert began receiving death threats. Just as he had done when he was younger, he realized he had to leave Germany once again. Leaving didn't trouble him as much as it might have troubled others. As he put it, "I've never felt a true sense of belonging to any country. Not even to my friends or my own family. Over the years, I've withdrawn further into myself. Living this isolated is not pleasant, but I've never regretted it. I've never needed approval or sympathy from others. That distance freed me from their ideas and their prejudices." In 1933, Albert and Elsa sailed for the United States. He began teaching at a university in Princeton, choosing a quiet life that suited his desire to remain detached. He took long walks from his calm, modest home on Mercer Street. He never learned to drive a car. He approached citizenship paperwork with the same casualness as waking up from sleep. More and more, he stripped away the expectations society tried to place on him. But life was about to become even harder. Elsa, the person who had kept him grounded, passed away in 1936. He never saw Mileva again. She died in 1949 from stomach cancer. His son Edward was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric institution in Switzerland until his death in 1966. His other son, Hans Albert, built a life as a professor in California, though he rarely saw his father. And what was Albert doing as all of this unfolded? He was still searching for that theory, the one unifying principle he believed existed underneath everything. He never found it. Some might say he wasted the last 30 years of his life, but that couldn't be further from the truth. His pursuit itself became a legacy. His critiques of quantum mechanics, the philosophical questions he raised, and the arguments he built all helped shape the way we think about the nature of reality today. More importantly, he showed future generations what they should be searching for. A single framework capable of uniting every law, every force, every equation. The elusive theory of everything. And the spark that ignited that pursuit came from him. During the war years, he stayed mostly silent. His only notable intervention was a letter to Roosevelt, urging the United States to accelerate nuclear research, warning what might happen if Germany succeeded first. Contrary to popular belief, he played no direct role in building the atomic bomb. After the war, people from every background sought his opinion. Once, representatives from Israel visited him on Mercer Street and offered him the presidency of the newly formed state. Naturally, a man like Albert could never accept such a position, and he didn't. No matter the circumstances, science remained at the center of his life. That unfinished theory stayed with him until the end. By the spring of 1955, his heart had grown weak. His health declined quickly. After being admitted to the hospital, he called his secretary on April 15th. He asked her to bring his pen, his glasses, and the notes he had left unfinished. He knew his time was nearly over. He asked for a calculator as well. Then he sat back and began working through one more calculation. This is why his story resonates so deeply. Whatever those final notes would have revealed, perhaps even the beginnings of a unified theory, he knew he would never see their impact. But it did not matter. Even in his final hours, he fought for the same thing he had pursued his entire life: understanding. Maybe that is what grants a person a form of immortality. Even when you know you will not see tomorrow, you still reach for answers. Albert never saw that new day. Shortly after midnight, on April 16, 1955, the boy whose eyes once lit up when his father handed him a simple compass, the man who reshaped our understanding of the universe and dared to say, "Look, this is how everything works," passed away at the age of 76. And perhaps that is the most meaningful ending possible. Knowledge does not die. What remains is the search for meaning, carried on by those who come after. A child, curious, imaginative, overflowing with questions, like every child. But this child would change the world. His name was Albert Einstein. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more deep dive documentaries like this one. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about Einstein's life, his ideas, and his legacy.